A single bruise helped bring down the Russian Empire. Not a bullet, not a bomb, not a secret political conspiracy, a bruise on the body of a little boy. His name was Alexei Romanov, the only son of Nicholas II, heir to the largest empire on earth, and the one life on which the future of an entire dynasty depended. His blood could not clot normally. An ordinary fall could become a medical emergency. A minor blow could leave him unable to walk. Bleeding inside a joint could continue for days while doctors stood beside his bed, almost powerless to stop it. The disease was hemophilia, but Russia was not allowed to know, and because the imperial family buried that one fact, the country was denied the only explanation that made sense of what followed: why a half-literate Siberian wanderer named Grigori Rasputin was permitted to stand closer to the throne than many of the ministers who governed the empire. Silence was supposed to protect the monarchy. Instead, it opened the palace door to a stranger, and once that door was open, the Romanovs could no longer control what Russia believed was happening behind it. Alexei was born in August 1904, the fifth child of Nicholas and Alexandra, and their first son after four daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia. Bells rang across the empire, cannons fired in salute. For a dynasty governed by male succession, Russia finally had its heir. Inside the palace, the celebration lasted for days. The fear lasted for the rest of Alexei's life. Soon after his birth, bleeding from his navel would not stop. Doctors examined him, and the truth arrived quietly. The heir had hemophilia. The disease had passed through his mother, Alexandra, a granddaughter of Queen Victoria. The same inherited disorder had already appeared in several of Europe's royal families. For any parents, the diagnosis would have been devastating. For Nicholas and Alexandra, it was also a political threat. The Russian monarchy was built around hereditary succession. Its future now rested on the body of a child who could be endangered by an ordinary accident. So the imperial couple made the decision that appeared safest. They hid the illness. They concealed it from much of the extended family. They concealed it from ministers. Most importantly, they concealed it from Russia. Official announcements described Alexei's condition in vague, reassuring language. The public was never told that its future emperor might be lying in bed because blood was filling his joints and muscles. The decision was understandable. Nicholas and Alexandra wanted to protect their son from public scrutiny and the dynasty from appearing fragile. But a secret of that size does not simply disappear. It creates an empty space, and sooner or later, rumor enters that space and supplies its own explanation. Alexei grew up inside two opposite realities. He possessed almost unimaginable privilege, yet lived under constant restriction. He wore miniature military uniforms. Soldiers saluted him. Courtiers addressed him as the future ruler of 1/6 of the planet. But he could not live like an ordinary boy. Sailors assigned to guard him watched his movements and tried to catch him before he fell. Running, climbing, or playing a rough game could end with days or weeks of pain. There was no effective treatment for the disease itself. Doctors could prescribe rest and attempt to manage the symptoms, but once internal bleeding began, there was often little they could do except wait. Blood accumulated inside Alexei's joints and muscles. His limbs swelled. Some days he could not walk. Some nights he could not stop crying. Alexandra sat beside him and watched the finest physicians in the Russian Empire fail to relieve her son's suffering. And slowly her world narrowed. Ministers worried about the government. Courtiers worried about the monarchy. Alexandra worried about whether her child would survive the night. This is the point where most versions of the story introduce Rasputin, but they usually tell it backward. The familiar version says Rasputin gained influence at court and then persuaded Alexandra that he could save Alexei. The truth runs in the opposite direction. Rasputin gained influence because Alexandra became convinced that she had already seen him succeed where the doctors had failed. The decisive crisis came in 1912 at the imperial hunting estate of Spawa, in what is now Poland. An injury led to severe internal bleeding. A difficult journey made Alexei's condition worse. Blood spread through his thigh and abdomen. His temperature rose, and the pain became almost unbearable. Doctors could not stop the bleeding. They prepared the kind of medical announcement issued when the death of an important person was expected. Alexei reportedly asked his mother whether it would stop hurting after he died. Alexandra was desperate. From a distance, she appealed to Rasputin. His response was calm and absolute. The boy would not die. Within days, Alexei began to recover. No one can prove that Rasputin caused that recovery. The bleeding may simply have run its course. Rest may have accomplished what active treatment could not. Rasputin's certainty may have calmed Alexandra, and her calm may have reduced some of the fear surrounding the child. Some historians have also suggested that less medical intervention may have spared Alexei from treatments that could worsen bleeding. Aspirin, for example, was widely used at the time, although its effect on clotting was not yet understood. There was no need for a miracle to explain Alexei's improvement, but medically, the explanation is not the most important part of the story. Politically, only one explanation mattered, the one Alexandra believed. She had watched the doctors fail. She had appealed to Rasputin. Rasputin had promised that Alexei would live, and Alexei had survived. From that moment, Rasputin was no longer merely a wandering religious figure to the Empress. He became the one person she believed could stand between her son and death. The rest of Russia saw an entirely different man. It saw an uneducated Siberian peasant with a scandalous reputation, a man accused of drinking, womanizing, and boasting about his influence over the imperial family. Alexandra saw a protector. Russia saw a threat, and both perceptions contained part of the truth. That was what made the situation so dangerous. Whenever courtiers warned Alexandra that Rasputin was destroying the monarchy's reputation, she heard something else. She heard them asking her to abandon the man who might save Alexei. To the court, removing Rasputin was a political necessity. To Alexandra, removing him could become a death sentence for her son. Russia saw a foreign-born empress protecting a disreputable holy man. Alexandra saw a mother refusing to sacrifice her child for the sake of appearances. Neither side possessed the full explanation, because the one fact that made both sides understandable was the one fact the palace refused to reveal. But this is where a private medical secret stopped being a family tragedy and became a political weapon. When Nicholas left for military headquarters in 1915 to assume personal command of the army, Alexandra became more involved in government from the capital. Her confidence in Rasputin followed her into politics. Ministers were appointed and dismissed with alarming speed. Rumor credited Rasputin with influence over every decision, whether he had exercised it or not. Soon, the story no longer required evidence. Rasputin was supposedly Alexandra's lover. Rasputin was selling government positions. Rasputin and the German-born empress were secretly working for the enemy. There is no convincing evidence that Alexandra was a German agent. Rasputin did not literally rule Russia from behind a curtain, but the palace could not publicly give the one explanation that might have made its tolerance of him comprehensible. We keep this man close because we believe he is the only person capable of saving our son. To say that would mean revealing the heir's illness. So the palace remained silent, and silence allowed the darkest version of the story to win. That is the political cost of a secret kept too well. It does not merely protect what is hidden, it abandons the truth to whoever tells the most convincing lie. By 1917, most Russians still did not know Alexei's secret, but the monarchy had already paid the political price for hiding it. Hemophilia did not cause the Russian Revolution by itself. Russia was already collapsing beneath military defeats, food shortages, social inequality, and a government that had lost the confidence of its people. No single illness could destroy an empire of that size, but an empire does not collapse from only one cause. Alexei's illness intensified Alexandra's fear. Her fear increased her dependence on Rasputin. Rasputin's presence damaged the credibility of the monarchy, and that lost credibility mattered enormously when war, hunger, and political failure brought the entire system to the edge. A hidden disease did not create every crack in the Russian Empire, but it widened one of the most dangerous cracks inside the palace itself. When the imperial family was executed in 1918, Alexei was 13 years old. For decades, the legends that followed concentrated on his sister. Had Anastasia escaped? Could one of the Romanovs still be alive? Behind those famous questions remained a quieter story, the disease the family had spent an entire reign trying to hide. Modern DNA analysis of the recovered remains eventually confirmed that Alexei had hemophilia B. Science answered, calmly and without political consequence, the question an empire had once been too frightened to discuss openly. Perhaps that is the real tragedy. The Romanovs believed that hiding Alexei's condition would protect their child and preserve the crown. Instead, it ensured that almost no one in Russia understood the fear governing the private life of the imperial family. Without that explanation, Rasputin appeared to have entered the palace for no reason. His access looked like corruption. Alexandra's trust looked like madness. And the silence surrounding Alexei allowed suspicion to replace understanding. We remember Rasputin as the man who found his way into the throne room, but the better question was never how he entered. It was why the door had been left open for him, and the answer was not politics, it was not the supernatural. It was a mother listening to her son scream, an emperor terrified that his dynasty might end with an ordinary fall, and a disease small enough to hide in a boy's blood, but powerful enough to help decide the fate of an empire.